Have you ever begged God to let someone stay? I don't mean casually. I mean desperately. You prayed through tears. You promised you would change. You told God you could not survive another loss. And still, they left. That kind of loss doesn't just break your heart. It shakes your faith. Because when God removes someone you are pleading to keep, it feels less like love and more like betrayal. You start asking questions you never wanted to ask. Why would God take what I was praying for? Was I wrong to love? Was I wrong to hope? But what if God didn't remove them to punish you? What if He removed them to save you? In this message, we are going to step carefully into a truth that is difficult to accept when your heart is still bleeding. Sometimes God removes people not because they are bad, but because keeping them would cost you your soul. What feels like rejection may actually be rescue. What feels like punishment may be protection. You will begin to see that loss is not always the enemy of faith. In Scripture, removal often comes before restoration, separation before growth, and silence before clarity. God does not always explain what He takes, but He is always intentional about what He protects. Together, we will explore why God allows certain relationships, opportunities, and seasons to end even when you beg Him to keep them. You will discover how attachment can quietly replace trust, how love can turn into bondage, and how God sometimes closes doors not to hurt you, but to lead you back to yourself and back to Him. There is a unique kind of pain that comes when you do everything right. You pray, you fast, you surrender, and still, God allows the separation. You didn't walk away carelessly. You didn't stop believing. You begged. And when they left anyway, it felt like heaven turned its back on you. In moments like this, faith becomes confusing. You wonder if prayer has limits. You question whether God listens differently to others. Scripture gives voice to this ache. David cried, "Why, Lord, do you stand far off? Why do you hide yourself in times of trouble?" This is not rebellion. It is grief spoken honestly. Psychologically, loss after prayer can create a sense of betrayal trauma. Spiritually, it exposes a hard truth. Prayer is not a contract. God is not obligated to preserve what we love, only what will ultimately heal us. Sometimes heaven says no, not because your request is wrong, but because your attachment has become dangerous. God sees not just the pain of losing them, He sees the cost of keeping them. And His silence is not cruelty. It is foresight. At first, it felt like love. Safe, comforting, necessary. You told yourself it was a gift from God, and maybe it was for a season. But over time, something subtle shifted. Your peace began to depend on their presence. Your joy rose and fell with their words. Losing them felt unthinkable, not because you loved deeply, but because you no longer knew who you were without them. Scripture warns us gently about this kind of attachment. Cursed is the one who trusts in man, who draws strength from mere flesh. This verse is not condemning love, it is exposing dependence. God never intended another human being to carry the weight of your identity or security. Psychologically, dependence blurs boundaries. Spiritually, it replaces trust in God with fear of loss. That is often when God intervenes, not to shame you, but to free you. When God removes someone you cannot imagine living without, He is not trying to break your heart. He is trying to return your heart to its proper center. Love becomes dangerous when it replaces God. And sometimes, the most loving thing God can do is to take away what you have begun to worship. There are moments when God removes someone not because the relationship was sinful, but because it had become subtle competition. You didn't choose them over God consciously. It happened slowly. Your prayers began to revolve around them. Your fears centered on losing them. Your future depended on their staying. Without realizing it, your heart built an altar, and God was no longer at the center of it. Scripture gives us a painful but revealing picture in Abraham's story. God asked him to place Isaac on the altar. Isaac was not evil. He was a promise. But when the promise began to occupy the place of the promiser, God intervened. Not to destroy Abraham, but to realign his worship. Spiritually, God will not share the throne of your heart. Psychologically, when someone replaces God, losing them feels like losing oxygen. That is why the separation hurts so deeply. God removes what competes with him, not because he is insecure, but because he knows idols eventually destroy those who bow to them. What he takes away may feel like cruelty until you realize he was protecting you from a slow, invisible collapse. Sometimes God removes someone not because of who they are now, but because of where the road with them leads. You saw comfort. God saw compromise. You saw companionship. God saw a future that would slowly drain your faith, your courage, or your calling. And because you could not see that future, his decision felt harsh. Scripture reminds us, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. This verse is not poetic encouragement. It is a warning. Your understanding is limited to what feels good today. God's understanding stretches into consequences you have not yet lived. Psychologically, we judge relationships by relief. Spiritually, God judges them by fruit. Some connections feel right because they numb pain, not because they lead to growth. God sees how certain bonds would require you to shrink, stay silent, or slowly trade obedience for belonging. When God closes a door you are knocking on, he is not being unkind. He is standing between you and a version of life that would cost you more than you are prepared to lose. Silence, then removal, becomes protection. There is a quiet tragedy that happens in some relationships. You don't just love them, you disappear inside them. Your voice softens. Your boundaries blur. Your dreams become smaller so the relationship can survive. You tell yourself this is sacrifice, but slowly you lose the person God created you to be. Scripture asks a piercing question. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world, yet forfeit their soul? This is not only about success or wealth. It is about any attachment that costs you your identity. God cares more about who you are becoming than who you are keeping. Psychologically, losing yourself feels safer than being alone. Spiritually, God will not allow you to remain where your soul is shrinking. That is why removal often feels violent, because it interrupts a pattern of self-erasure. When God removes someone, he may be saying, you are losing yourself trying to keep them. This is not rejection. It is rescue. God is returning you to your voice, your strength, and your dignity, even if the process feels unbearably lonely at first. Some people are not meant to stay, not because they are harmful, but because you began to lean on them in ways only God was meant to support. Their presence became a crutch. Their approval steadied you. Their staying reassured you that you would be okay. And without realizing it, your faith started walking with a limp. Scripture says, we live by faith, not by sight. Sight includes what you can hold on to: people, routines, familiar voices. God sometimes removes what stabilizes you externally, so he can strengthen you internally. What feels like collapse is often rehabilitation. Psychologically, crutches feel safe because they reduce pain. Spiritually, they delay healing. God is not cruel for taking them away. He is committed to your wholeness. A faith that cannot stand alone will not survive long journeys. When God removes someone you relied on, he is not setting you up to fall. He is teaching you how to stand. And when you finally do, you will realize that the strength you thought you lost was actually being built all along. If God has removed someone from your life and you are still grieving the loss, hear this with gentleness. You were not rejected, you were protected. God did not ignore your prayers. He answered them in a way your pain could not yet understand. What he removed was never meant to destroy you. It was meant to free you. You are not weak for missing them. You are not faithless for hurting. Loss hurts precisely because love was real. But God's love is deeper, still deep enough to take away what would have slowly taken you away from yourself. The same God who allowed the separation is the God who is now rebuilding you. Not into who you were before, but into someone stronger, clearer, and more whole. One day, you will look back and realize that the door you begged God to keep open was the door He closed to save your future. If this message resonates with you, write in the comments, "God knows what He's doing." Let it be your declaration of trust, even if your heart is still healing. And if you need more messages like this, consider subscribing and sharing this video with someone who is struggling to understand the painful goodbye. You are not alone, and this loss is not the end of your story.